Welcome to the Window Wisdom Podcast, your guide to replacement windows and more. Hi, I'm Ted Kirk, your host, and this is episode 4. Today we're going to be talking about glass. In episode 2, we learned about the frames around the glass and how that can certainly affect your view. But today we're going to take it a step further to talk about how the glass is put together. Have you ever sat in front of a window and just felt that heat coming through where it was almost unbearable? Or have you ever seen your floors fade around your rugs or your furnishings, your window treatments? This all has to do with what type of glass you have in your windows. And the way that window companies build their glass units before they go into their windows can vary greatly. So when glass units are built, they're called IGs or insulated glass unit. And typically they have a thin metallic coating applied to the glass surface on the inside, and that is called low E or low emissivity glass. And then also we use inert gases in between the panes, and how these are filled and what they're sealed with can vary greatly. But to obtain maximal energy efficiency and light coming into your home, you really need to know a little bit about the glass and how it's built. So a lot of companies out there, they'll build insulated glass unit kind of like a sandwich. They'll take one piece of glass that they buy from one of the very few glass manufacturers across the U.S., and then they'll take a seal system and put around that glass, and then they'll take another piece of glass and they'll put those together. And then they'll take a little tube and they'll fill it with an inert gas, usually argon, to try to make it more efficient. Other glass or window companies will actually take and fill their glass units inside a vacuum chamber, for example. So you get a much higher fill rate. They may use an original seal system rather than an aftermarket seal system. This can make the unit more durable, more resistant to stress cracks and seal failure down the road. So how can you tell you're getting a good energy efficient glass package? One of the ways to do this is looking at an independent certification label by an organization called the NFRC. That stands for the National Fenestration Rating Council. Fenestration is just a fancy term for glass or glazings. A couple of things that they'll rate on the NFRC label is your U factor. And this is basically the rate of heat transfer through the glass. And the U factor is also an inverse of the R value. A lot of people are familiar with the R value based on insulating the walls or the attic in their home. Another figure to pay attention to on the NFRC label is called a solar heat gain coefficient, or the SHGC number. And that's the ratio of solar heat passing through the window. This includes radiant heat transmitted and the solar heat that is absorbed and transferred through the window. So think of this as a very important number in your climates that require more cooling. So really heat-related climates, hotter areas. Another number that you can typically get on the NFRC label is called the air leakage number. Generally, most companies will not put the actual air leakage. They just put a 0.3, which is kind of a standard that's printed on the label. When you actually start to deal with the glass in a residential general construction, say a builder grade window, is what they call single strength glass. It's about 3/32 of an inch thick. On a replacement window, particularly a better quality replacement window, you're going to get double strength glass. This is about 1/8 of an inch thick, but they call it double strength glass because it really takes twice as much pressure to break. We did talk about tempered glass in an earlier episode. This is glass that's typically used in a hazardous location, and this is about 4 times the strength of single strength glass. And again, it would probably shatter into small fragments. We also have what we call laminated glass. This is typically used in a high impact area where the glass will not break all the way through. It's also good for sound reduction. Also gives you great UV ratings as well. It lowers the UV fading that can happen to your floors, your furnishings, and anything that can be damaged by UV. There's also different types of glass when it comes to privacy or decorative options. So if you have that bathtub and you want to let the light come in, but you want that privacy, then there's glass that will accomplish that for you. And one of the biggest things that we hear a lot of requests for are what they call STC or OITC glass. And this basically just stands for sound transmission class, or outdoor-indoor sound transmission class glass, which basically reduces the sounds from the street, the sounds from your neighbors. You got to have realistic expectations. We kind of say, well, if your neighbor has 3 dogs barking next door, you may only hear 1. So a lot of times people also would like different tints on the glass, so that's often available. And then the other thing to think about with glass is, do you want just one light of glass, or do you want it divided up? And that can be accomplished with grills or divided lights. And in an earlier episode, we talked about simulated divided lights, which are bonded on both sides of the glass, or grids between the glass, which is exactly how they sound. So when it comes to glass, you have a lot of options out there, and it's an important part of the window. So do a little extra research to figure out what type of glass you're getting, how it's put together. Pair that with what climate zone you're in, because that can make a big difference. For example, if you're in an area where it's primarily a colder climate, you may want a glass that's going to allow more heat into the room while blocking less of that heat. And if you're in an area that has a lot more solar heat, then you may want some increased performance to protect you against the intense sun exposure. And that also relates to blockage of the sun's damaging UV rays. So there's different types of metallic coatings that can be put on the window glass. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. And as long as you do your research, you should end up with some pretty good glass. There's a lot of options out there. Thank you for listening.